Start this up. All right, guys. So day 5 of how to understand the markets like a pro. And today is going to be introduction to TRAMA and VWAP. So what TRAMA actually stands for, we went over this in the first video a bit, transitory relatively adaptive moving average. And VWAP stands for volume weighted average price. And we're kind of going to go over what these guys are and how we use them. Today more so isn't going to be a full depth explanation and things of that nature. This is more so to get introduced to it. So going into the week, every time you guys do hop on for New York session and hop in the Discord VC, you guys can kind of understand what we're looking for with TRAMA and VWAP. So let's pop open our chart here. And yeah, okay, so we'll start with NASDAQ and then go to gold and see how TRAMA is kind of used and how VWAP is kind of used. So before we begin, what TRAMA actually is basically a moving support and resistance. That's the best way to think of TRAMA. And TRAMA will be helpful in many cases, right? For entries, exits, trims, and stop loss potentials, right? So TRAMA is going to be used for all four. It can be helpful to identify any single one of those and can always be a nice extra confluence. Thing with TRAMA is it is different on every time frame, right? So for example, right now on the 1 minute, TRAMA is currently at right around 124. But if you switch over to your 5 minute, you'll notice that TRAMA is actually at 25,090. And if you switch over to your 15, you'll notice that TRAMA is actually right around 120 as well. And it will be different on every time frame, and we're going to use it different on every time frame. So as we went over yesterday, most of our entries do come off the 1 minute, but we use our 5 minute and 15 minute for our bias. So we're going to be using all three of these time frames in conjunction, just like how we went over yesterday, how we use the RSI and Bollinger Bands in conjunction. We're also going to be using the 15, 5, and 1 minute TRAMA all together. And we also do sometimes take a look at the hourly TRAMA and 4 hour TRAMA, but these are more so used very less. It's not as common for a price to get to 1 hour, 4 hour daily TRAMA. It's like maybe once every couple of days when we test one of these key areas. But when we do eventually test those key areas, it does play a pivotal point. If you look at most of the times when we end up reversing, right, is when we do break and close under TRAMA, and then when we break and close above TRAMA is when we get our continuation on the 4 hour. Same thing with the daily. If we come over to our daily, right, every time we broke and close under, we get our dumps. Anytime we broke and closed above, we get our pumps and dumps, etc. But it's not as simple as above TRAMA go long, below TRAMA go short. So we're actually going to kind of learn how to use it a bit today and get a brief explanation. So short hints. TRAMA is your moving and support and resistance, right? We have our supply and demand levels that we mapped out, but sometimes we are in between levels that are almost 100 points in range and have no level in between. And that's when TRAMA is actually going to become your best friend. For example, right here at this 25,064 area, from this level, right, to this level up here to 197, we have no real levels in between. There is a big range. If you enter a trade anywhere around these bottoms or tops, you would not have a real trim point other than previous price action lows or possibly on the RSI. But now with TRAMA, you're going to have potential trim areas and potential entry areas. For example, over here, when we got this breakout, right, we did not have a level here or anything. What it really was a break and close above these little highs and break and close above TRAMA on the 15, and then we got to move to the upside. And then we've kind of been chopping here and consolidating for the next move. So we haven't fully broken closed under. We've closed a couple times, but we've seen no continuation. Usually when you break and close under TRAMA, you want to see a break, a retest, and a break again, right? You want to see continuation. Right here, there's no real continuation. The closest thing to continuation we had was at close when we closed right under it, and then we chopped. But this was during after hours, so this wasn't really high volume. And you can see the second after hours did open up at 3, we kind of got bought up and got right above TRAMA again. So we've been chopping right at TRAMA with no real direction here. And how you use it when you're actually day trading, if we come over to 15 again and come over to our open for New York session, do you guys notice something for all of New York session, right? From 6:30 to close, what do you guys notice about TRAMA on the 15 at least? Can you guys tell me? Anybody?
TRAMA has stayed on top of price?
Correct. So we have failed to break and close above TRAMA a single time in New York session. This doesn't necessarily mean you're 100% bearish on the day, but this is going to be a big, big thing you should notice when you're trading, right? That's what you always want to check every time frame, the 15, 5, and 1 when you are checking your trades for confluences. Anytime you were looking at price today, you would have noticed that TRAMA was actually, slowly creeping down as price was going down, but we never once did break and close above it. We tried to here, and we're still trying to now, but we have just failed to see some continuation as of right now. So now we'll switch over to our 5 minute, right? Go over to our 5. Okay, same thing on our 5. What do we notice here? We basically failed to break TRAMA since
On
open.
the 5, we're still trying to.
Yeah. So we have failed to break, and every time we do retest TRAMA, it was usually at the retest of the previous highs or previous lows, right? Right here, previous highs, rejection with TRAMA, right? You see how price action is lining up with TRAMA. Okay, boom, we get our dump. We come down to our previous low, and we break that low, all right? Create a lower low, and next time we come back up to that previous low, what does that line up with again, right? TRAMA. You guys see how these confluences are kind of lining up together, and how you would use them, and how you would use price action now with TRAMA. So you come up to those previous lows, reject that previous low, fail to go higher, and now previous support is now your resistance here, and TRAMA is also there. We do try to get a breakout here, and we do get a close above TRAMA, and then we get a little bit of continuation. But then, guess what? We fail to break these highs. And this is why you never want to have a clear bias just because we break and close above TRAMA, right? You can't be like, oh, we broke and closed above TRAMA, we're going to go all the way in reverse, right? Because that's just not true. Because first of all, you haven't actually broke these highs yet. This is just a short-term break. And then we tried to break here, and we failed to do so. And then if you would have looked at our 15 at this time, so right around 9:30, let's see what our 9:30 was doing, right? Look at TRAMA on the 15. We still got room up. We're nowhere near. So this is where you want to check your 15, your 5, and your 1 and make sure everything's lining up. In this case scenario, your 15 still has, not broken, and we're still under 15-minute TRAMA. And we try breaking, failed to do so, and then we do break and close under again. And what happens when we take out our previous lows? Boom, we come down, and next time we retest those lows, where are we at again on TRAMA, right? Right at those previous lows. And the reason why this works like this is because the settings we actually have on TRAMA. So the settings we use on TRAMA is the 34 close, which is basically the last 34 candles. It's pretty accurate. 34, why? I'm not too sure. The person that taught me how to the person that taught me how to use this just told me that's the number that works. And I mean, we've tested it for years now, and it's been pretty spot on. I mean, on every time frame, it's been like pitch perfect, spot on. So we have it at the past 34 candles, and what it does with the past 34 candles, it actually takes the top wicks, bottom wicks, candle close and open, and puts it into like an average price. So this is why I prefer to use TRAMA instead of a moving average or an EMA. It's just a lot more accurate. And if you are an EMA or MA trader, the second you switch over to TRAMA, you're gonna be like, man, I should have been using this months, years ago, depending on how long you've been trading, MAs or EMAs. So TRAMA is basically the closest thing we have to an MA or EMA. So if you are an EMA or MA trader, this is basically what we use TRAMA like, and it's just a moving support and resistance at the end of the day. We're never ever going to take a trade strictly based on TRAMA, right? We will never be like, oh, we're at TRAMA, I'm going to go longer. Oh, we're testing TRAMA, I'm going to go short. There always has to be other confluences on top of that, but it will be a nice extra confluence, because sometimes we'll be in chop. For example, these areas here, you get in some chop and you have no level. For example, when we're testing this high, we don't have no level here. Yeah, we're retesting these lows, but guess what? TRAMA is also giving us that extra confluence to possibly take the short here. And we do come lower and lower, and then we do start chopping at these levels that we have. And if you notice something, right, when we start chopping at these levels, when we do break and close TRAMA here, we get a nice little pop, and then we do sell back off under. So you can see the 5 minute, when we do break and close under or over, we do get small pops, but we don't necessarily get a lot of continuation. Sometimes we'll get a lot more continuation depending on the trend, but since you are fighting the trend, technically speaking, today, it was a pretty bearish day. When you do get these TRAMA breaks, you always want to be trimming, at your other key areas. In this case scenario, this was a top trend line, and these previous lows over here, and your 5 minute was topped out. So there was confluences to trim up here, and then we do end up rejecting, coming back down, holding these lows. And then again, we break TRAMA. What happens when we break TRAMA on these highs? We get another pop, and same thing, we double top, fail to break this top trend line, again topped out on the 5, create that little top divergence, and then we reject here. And then again, come back down, and basically it's rinse and repeat. And we've basically been holding 5 minute TRAMA for now since then. So we're basically just in this pennant for now that we were talking about before we started this call. So we necessarily haven't broke under, but we're not seeing a breakout either. So we're just kind of waiting, see what happens. And now let's look at our 1 minute and see how we would use TRAMA on the 1 minute. All right, we'll come over to the 1 minute. I will say trauma on the 1 minute is going to be the most trickiest. Reason why I say that is you're trading a smaller time frame, right? There will be a lot more fake outs on the 1 minute compared to the 5 and 15. Usually when you break and close on the 5 and 15, you are like almost guaranteed to get your pop or continuation. On the 1 minute, not so much, but it will be helpful in some cases, right? For retests of breakouts, breakdowns, or possibly catching tops, bottoms, and trims. So we'll start at open and see what trauma did since New York session open, and we'll kind of follow it along throughout the day. What happened today? Okay, so we'll come over to our open right about here, right? So first of all, market opens at 6:30. Boom, we get a pop to the upside. All right, we start breaking these highs, but we failed to close above, and we still close under trauma. All right, come down here, test these lows, fail to break, and then come back up to trauma and reject. Right, and then boom, we break this low, close under, and then get continuation and start chopping. So right here, we didn't really test trauma. We were under trauma, but we didn't necessarily test it. So in short term, anything under trauma is technically, I guess you would say, sellers are in control or bearish. And then, when you break and close, you get your buyers in control and, technically bullish, you can say. And then, we come down to this level here at 271. We start bouncing, come over to median, right? Median on the R side, this R side level. We talked about this yesterday. And look at trauma. Also lines up with the R side level of median, right? Now, what happens when we break that 1 minute median, that 1 minute RSI level, and 1 minute trauma, and these previous highs here, right? We get our small pop, and then we come back out and take out these lows. But guess what? We don't break the full low, and this is where those fake outs are very common on 1 minute trauma. Because look what ends up happening, right? We come back out and break this high, and then make a full high and reject VWAP. So this is where the 1 minute can be really tricky, and this is why you always want to look at every time frame, because you always want to make sure your trade is still valid. In this case scenario, even though we're back under trauma, your trade is still valid, right? You're still above 1 minute median, you're still above your RSI level that you broke, and you're right at these highs and lows. So you haven't fully flipped. If you're taking this trade, me personally, I would have waited for a break of these lows to close this out, because you are trying to technically catch a bottom for the day. And the issue a lot of people do is, say you enter here around this area. You get this pop, but you don't TP or you don't trim or you don't set your stop loss to break even, right? Why are you not trimming / TPing or at least trailing your stop somewhat? Because look what ended up happening. We come up to that New York session open high and we reject, right? We failed to go higher and we reject our 508, and then we end up double topping here. Look at our high. Buyers failed to take price higher. We come back down. We start taking out these lows, and guess what? We get at 1 minute trauma and start consolidating, right? Because this is where buyers are supposed to step in and keep price above. This would have created a higher low if buyers would have stepped in here and price would have held. But instead, we do break and close 1 minute trauma, and then we come down back to these lows, and we start breaking those lows. Right here, all of this, there was no real trade here because there's no entry, right? You don't have no real entry here. But you do get an entry here. You get a nice entry here, matter of fact. Because now, you get a breakdown of this 271. You H pattern from these lows. You break that low, and you come down to this level down here at 197. And then you come up, try to break this 271. Fail to do so. Create this little liquidity above the level. You come to 1 minute trauma, fail to break above, and you're topped out on your 1 minute, and you're at your RSI level on the one as well, as you can see here. And this would have been your entry for the short, right? This is where you could use trauma as an entry. You would have been able to take your entry right around this area, right? You have your trauma, your level, and you're top down on the one, and you have your RSI level. And then from there, you would have been able to catch your move down to this level at this previous low, and you could have trimmed here or, held for this full move and just had your stop loss at break even. And you would have never been stopped out, basically, and you would have been able to catch, basically, this full dump risk-free. Technically, you probably should have been trimming on the way, and you could just look for another re-entry on the RSI in 1 minute, whatever it may be. You can see there was many retests of 1 minute trauma, and there was a lot of possible re-entries. But let's take a look for another example of a entry or a rejection of trauma, right? So another way you could kind of notice a trend here is we make this low here, right? This is our key low over here, and then we start consolidating here, right? We're failing to break trauma. We go lower and then try to retest trauma again. Failed to do so again, and we're just failing to break these highs. We're not making higher highs and we're making lower lows. So now we have our little consolidation range here. So what we can do is two things. We can wait for the break of these lows to play the continuation, or you can try to top tick this area for a possible top entry here on this 1 minute trauma, because it also lines up with your RSI here where we are topped out on the band. And then you could take your possible entry at 1 minute trauma. So this is why we always look for entries or exits around trauma, because it usually lines up with a lot of things. In this case scenario, your previous lows, your RSI, and your RSI level. So you would have been able to catch possible top entries here. And I don't say an exact entry here because literally all of these were possible entries. You could have entered here, here, here. All of these are fine. Why? Because we are not breaking these highs, or I mean these previous lows. We're not making higher highs, and we're not breaking trauma, and we're not opening up on the bands. We're not like doing any key things. Now everything I've explained, right? Imagine doing it all at the same time. The 1 minute, 5 minute, 15. You want to check every time frame, because this can easily, say the 5 minute showed you a confluence such as, trauma was at these lows instead, or there was a key level there, or we're bottomed out, we're at median, we're at an RSI level on the 5 or 15. You always want to keep that in check, because the bigger time frames, the 5 and 15, will always overrule the 1 minute. The 1 minute is going to be your smallest time frame, so you're mainly looking for scalps or quick pops or quick trades on the 1. But say now the 5, 15, and the 1 are aligned, you're just taking your entry off the 1 minute, but basing your trade off the 5 and 15. So that's what you always want to look at every time frame when you are trading. So let's take a look at NASDAQ right now, for example. Let's see what it is doing. So we can see it is trying to break this little top pennant right around this area. And we kind of were consolidating at TRAMA / VWAP for a cool minute here. Not much. And we did break this little divergence that we had and got a little pop. It wasn't that good of a move just because it's really choppy here. There's not much volume for after hours for today. But as of right now, it is looking pretty bullish on the 1. So now let's check the 5, right? If we come over to our 5, we can also see that we have failed to break 5 minute trauma. We tried breaking here, created liquidity, and then have just consolidated to upside. Check our 15. Same thing on our 15. If we come here, we can kind of see it's just been chopping at TRAMA / VWAP. No real indication here. So honestly, there's no real good A+ setup here, right? There's not enough confluences for any trade. All we know is we are in consolidation period and we're waiting for a breakout or breakdown. That's what we would be looking for in this case scenario. Because all of this consolidation, yes, you could trade the chop, but you would just be trading the range. So up from bottom range, top of range, and you'd be in scalps. That's basically what's been happening for the last 2 hours. Oh, almost 3 hours actually. Yeah, for the last 3 hours we've just been consolidating now. So no real setups here, even on the 15. Now, if you want to check your hourly for your bigger time frame, what does it show? Same thing, not much, right? Trauma's all the way up here, and we're just consolidating. I mean, your RSI is breaking this level, and we have bottomed out, but not much here. Okay, now let's take a look at trauma again on gold, just to show you guys the different symbols and things of that nature. So trauma is always going to be a good entry point, as we talked about. And let's show you some examples here on the 1. I took a gold trade earlier, right about, where was it? Here. And this was a real trade I took like 30 minutes ago. So price is consolidating here. We break this little bottom trend line and we get a move to the downside, right? I don't have a level anywhere around this area because we have a big range from 171 all the way to this 214, right? So when I'm trying to catch a little pop here / scalp, I'm going to look for 2 things. I'm going to make sure on the 1 minute that we are bottomed out, and on the 1 minute we are at a maybe an RSI level, or at least at trauma. In this case scenario, I was able to catch almost a bottom entry here. I entered at 181.5 right about here on gold, and I set my TP at 188 all the way up here. So I entered here, and my reasons were, first of all, our RSI came to this RSI level and held, and then so after it held, I put my limit order and it came down and filled me. Our RSI is trying to bottom out. Our 1 minute is at trauma. The only thing that was kind of contradicting this trade was the 15 was kind of topped out, and we had some room to the downside. If we come over to that time, yeah, so we had a little bit of room to the downside. We ended up coming down and holding median though, so overall picture still really bullish on gold. And how's it called? Our 5 minute was also bottomed out here. This is our side level when we cut that pop. So that was a pretty solid setup on gold. And our main bias for the reason why we got such a really good entry was because of trauma, right? Because say you were just trying to enter because we were at an RSI level or at the bottom of the band. There was a little bit of a chop here around this RSI level on the bottom of the band here, and you could have possibly thought, oh yeah, we're gonna bottom out at 185, right? Because that's when the RSI was at this RSI level and trying to bottom out. But the thing is, now imagine you had an extra confluence, trauma, right? And you can look at where trauma was. It was matching up with this RSI level instead, and that's where we actually ended up bottoming out. and say hypothetically speaking we would have broken closed under, we probably would have got this dump that happened later when we did break and close under, all the way down to 176, and from here we probably would have broke this RSI level, maybe came down to this 11.94 and then bounced from there. So in this case, TRAMA was able to help us get a really good entry. So we almost got the bottom entry here because of TRAMA. So just nice little extra confluence that you add. You can see I'm not taking the trade just because of TRAMA, but we're using the RSI with the Bollinger Bands now with TRAMA as well. So it's just nice little extra confluence to add to the group. So that's kind of the basics of TRAMA. So everything I just said for entries, now you're going to see for short entries as well, right? So you can kind of see that on NASDAQ over here, like how we were seeing our short entries on NASDAQ on the one all day today, right? TRAMA was almost your best friend today during New York session. There was a lot of entries, exits with TRAMA. So second thing we're going to go over today is VWAP. VWAP is pretty boring and pretty simple. As we said earlier, it stands for volume weighted average. Basically what it is it just takes the average price of the day and puts it into one price point. Really simple. Is it a major confluence? No. Do we use it a lot? No. Is it touched a lot during a day? Not really, because VWAP is the same on every time frame. During New York session, VWAP is honestly sometimes never even touched. Maybe you'll touch it one time and that's it. Like for example today, right? The only time it touched it was during open. After that, never touched it again. So it was practically useless today. So it is the same on every time frame. All VWAP is basically like TRAMA, but less useful because it is not as accurate, right? It's not different on every time frame. We're just trading the average of the day. So you can see today it was basically useless. The only time we could have used it was at this high and probably played this double top off VWAP, these previous highs, and your 5 and 15 topping out here, and your little top trend line and 508 rejection area. So VWAP is going to be a lot less useful. We're probably only going to use it like maybe max once a day if touched, but a lot of days it doesn't even get touched, and it could just not even play a part of it. So we just have VWAP there just for the love of the game almost. It's sometimes helpful because a lineup with TRAMA, and you could be like, okay, in this case scenario, right, we had broken and closed above 5 minute TRAMA, but then we failed to break VWAP and these previous highs. So it's going to be practically the same thing. In short term, same thing as TRAMA. If you're under VWAP, technically bearish. If you're above VWAP, technically bullish. We're never going to base a trade just based on that, but that's the overall picture of how VWAP is used. Other than that, that's about it for today. It was just a small introduction on how we kind of look at TRAMA. We're going to have another specific class just on TRAMA on how to find like actual entries with the RSI, price action, Bollinger Bands, and how to like look for an entry. But I just kind of wanted to introduce you guys what actually TRAMA is, so you guys can kind of start to look for it in real time. And then as the classes slowly go, we're gonna start to actually learn how to use everything together. We kind of talked about how we're using price action with TRAMA in a lot of these trades. So we're gonna be having a whole session just strictly looking at entries, exits, and trims with TRAMA. But yeah, so that's the basics of what TRAMA is. For all the new people, Mr. Zane, Santa Cruz, Raulito, does that kind of make sense? Somewhat of basis, like before you probably just kind of give you somewhat of an understanding of what it is now.
Yes.
And Mr. Sean as well.
Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, other Sean, my fault. I always forget there's two Seans now. I started hopping on Ableton, by the way, Sean. If price breaks above TRAMA, it'd be bullish, hypothetically. Technically, most of the time, yes. That's when you'll catch your breakout trades, and that's when you'll catch your, stuff like that, potential reversals. It depends what time frame you're looking at, because usually on your reversals, you're looking for a 1 minute TRAMA break, but on the bigger time frame, the 5 and 15 could be your breakout trades, things of that nature. So it all depends on the market structure, what the market is doing for the day. You can't necessarily just think, if price breaks above TRAMA, we're 100% going to be bullish. You have to look at all the factors. But in a shorthand, yes, that's what it, most of the time when TRAMA does break, it is a bullish sign and bullish confluence. Counterintuitive, it is also a possible short confluence because, right, if you're approaching TRAMA, you don't know if it's broken and closed yet until you wait for your candle. So say you have bearish confluences and we're approaching TRAMA, you could use that as your possible short entry. Yes, Mr. Galaxy, what were you saying? My fault.
So how there's like trauma is different on each time frame, right? And you said that your trims and entries come off of trauma. How do you know which time frame is trauma to use? Because sometimes it's
So
pretty close.
think of it this way, right? Your 15 and your 5 hour is going to be a bigger time frame, right? So if you're trying to play the bigger picture, you want to look at the bigger picture. If you're playing the short picture, you're going to look at the shorter picture, right? If you're looking for a scalp, the 1 minute is going to be your best friend. If you're looking for the bigger picture, your 5 minute and 15 are going to be your best friend.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because like say you're trading the 1 minute, right, and you're scalping, your 1 minute trauma is going to be your trim. But say you're playing the 5 minute, your 1 minute is going to be your trim, but your full TP is going to be your 5 minute trauma or your 15 minute trauma. You get what I'm saying? That's why when I'm going to trade, you'll usually say, oh, I'm trimming here at 1 minute trauma, and then you'll hear me say, oh, I'm fully taking profit like a 5 minute trauma or 15 minute trauma, etc. But say I'm just in an in and out trade, I'll usually full TP.
All right, thanks.
If price breaks above trauma to catch when it bottoms out on the RSI would be under white lines in general. Wait, to catch when it bottoms out on the RSI would be, I'm confused here, Santa Cruz. Okay, to catch when it bottoms out in general, the RSI would be under the white lines, correct? So usually when the RSI does bottom out, sometimes we overextend. Like most bottoming outs on the RSI, you will see an overextension of some sort. Like right here, we kind of overextend and then get flattened out, overextend and flatten out, overextend and flatten out. You just want to see your Bollinger Band start to get flat, and you always, like we talked about yesterday, you want to see your RSI to curl back inside the band and start to get flattened out again, right? So most of the time you can see the RSI is overextended, and then it comes back inside the band and it starts to flatten out, and then we start getting back inside the band. So you always want to kind of wait for your RSI to fully flatten out before you try to catch a bottom. Because if you don't wait for it to flatten out, what will end up happening is this, right? Look at where we first started bottoming out on the RSI up here, right? You could have been like, oh, we're at the bottom band, I'm going to go long. And guess what? Price was at 508. But what ends up happening, we get a quick pop, not a full reversal, and we go lower, and then we're at the bottom band again. Oh, I'm going to go long. And guess what? We do get a quick pop. But these should be, trimming on the way up because, you have confluences trim. But our full reversal happened when the RSI fully came back inside the band and started getting flat. Because you can see right here, the band was still opening up, band was still opening up, band was still opening up, and then we're fully flat here. And when we're fully flat here, you get your pop, and then you get your retest, and you can turn your retest, and then you get to catch it, move to the upside. And then we did end up topping out and rejecting, and then we fully reversed again. And then right here, we just consolidate a median. Then we break median, get our dump. Same thing, bottom of the band, RSI level, start flattening out, and then we consolidate and get our pop. And then top out on the RSI again, retest the median, retest the lows, top out again on the RSI. Top trend line, rejection, etc. So you're just going to use everything together with price action, RSI, Bollinger Bands, and trauma. You don't want to just base a trade specifically on one or the other. You want to use all of them in confluence. And it's going to be a lot more helpful if you guys are new, right? A lot of this kind of doesn't make sense until you start seeing it in real time, right? So you have to watch the charts. That's why I've been telling you guys, like after the classes, into tomorrow, this is what you should be looking. You should mainly focus on trauma tomorrow, right? And then, when we learn about price action, you should mainly focus on price action. You just want to start watching it in real time and see how it moves in real time. Because that will make things make a lot more sense. It's one thing to watch me like tell you, oh yeah, this happened. Because it already happened, right? This stuff already happened. This is like, we know this already happened. But in real time, you want to see how it reacts to these things. So that's why it's very important to actually watch the charts in real time and see what happens and start getting in the hang of it and seeing how price reacts to specific things. So I always tell people, trading takes a lot of time because you have to watch charts a lot. It's not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen overnight. Just anytime you have free time, watch the chart, see how price reacts. But yeah, any questions about any of this? Anybody, old or new members, whatever it may be.
Yo, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Would there ever be a time where we're at low of day, but we're barely at median?
Yes. And that means two things, right? That's a good thing. That actually happened today, right? Let's pull it up in the chart. And this is why a lot of people got fucked today, right? Not with this strategy, but other strategies in general. Because there was a lot of fake outs. And let's talk about a fake out, right? Down here, okay? You remember when Noah was short?
Yeah.
A lot of people were going short around that area, right? You know why?
Yeah.
What has the trend of the day been? Break every low and go lower, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? Where are we at in price when we're at this low of day?
Above median.
So who's in control?
The buyers.
So technically speaking, we don't want to take this short until we actually break these lows and break median. We failed to break
We're
median.
not bearish till it breaks the median. Right?
Yeah, even though price went lower, you know, buyers still in control. And that's why sometimes you'll see like bear or me take trades like this where like, you know, we're trying to catch along even though price is going lower because you're just consolidating waiting for that breakout. And then it does happen sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Granted, you know, like, you know, we could have broke these lows and then broke median. We would have flushed to probably this 905 area. But, you know, median saved us from playing that short. Like, I didn't try shorting any of this. I was trying to long literally every single one of these wicks. I got stopped out on a lot of these at break even. But then I eventually did catch this pop near end of day. I think you caught that too, right, Andy? If I'm not mistaken. At six, when you said 6-7, the entry, you remember?
Yeah, I caught the shorts and the longs.
Yeah, so yeah, that does happen sometimes, and that's with time, like, and experience. That's when I used to get caught in trades like I'd be like, oh, we were at low day and we were trying to break median, and then I would try to short same thing. But as time goes, you kind of learn what to do and what not to do and what to wait for and what not, like, you know, what is a good confluence, what isn't a good confluence. So that's why I tell you guys, like, you guys have to like watch the charts and, you know, with the
because that is something I've realized like recently. Like, even though we're like breaking the previous lows, we most of the times it just consolidates down hella slowly, but doesn't. Even though it actually even though it broke, it's, you know, you don't get that flush.
Yeah, and that's why you can't just trade off like price action, because sometimes you'll get those fake outs. Like, I mean, we created a lower low here and we failed to go lower, and we just created liquidity with this wick and then fully reversed. So that's why you definitely got to be careful, and you got to have good confluences and to take a trade. Oh shit, Nasdaq's about to break out of the pennant though. Let's see if we do break. Any other questions? Anybody in VC?
Does it mean something like when TRAMA and VWAP are combined together, like right now? On
Yes.
the 1 minute
It means you have to go to national tenders.
All right.
I'm trolling. On the 1 minute you said?
Yeah, it's like holding hands right now at 1 minute.
So yes, it does mean something, but not necessarily anything. I know that's like, what the fuck do you mean? But just because they're together doesn't mean it's like, you know, like something's gonna happen. It's the same thing as, you know, if just TRAMA or VWAP is there. That's just like a double confluence. Like, oh, they're both at the same price. All right, you know, if we break, we're gonna short, or, you know, if we hold, we're probably gonna bounce and break the highs. It's just like the same thing as, you know, them being near each other. But some people are gonna be like, oh, TRAMA VWAP are crossing, that's bullish or bearish. That's not true. You know, like EMA's crossing or MMA's crossing, that's kind of bullshit. And it doesn't really mean anything.
Okay.
So like if they cross or, you know, they do something, you know, doesn't really mean anything. And you just want to trade them the same way, you know, like it's a moving support and resistance. Any more questions? When TRAMA is like down chart right now, what is it saying? On what time frame? Because it's different on every time frame, right? Our 1 minute is right here, but our 5 minutes down here, and then our 1 minute's here. Or this is our 1 minute too. 15's right down here at 120. On every time frame, or like a specific one, or generally speaking? So what are we looking for when we check all three time frames? That depends, you know. You want to check everything, not just TRAMA, right? You want to check your RSI, you want to check your price action, you want to check everything. So in this case scenario, we'll do our top-down analysis. So we'll start at 15, right? What do we notice on the 15 that we talked about earlier? We're basically just in this pennant, right? We're in this big range. We have these wick highs that we failed to break, and then we have these wick lows that we failed to break, right? We're in this little pennant. So, okay, that's our 15. We don't have no real clear signal. We do see that we did top out on the Bollinger Bands. It is slowly opening up, but it's not opening up excessively. So this is a potential topping out sign if we don't, you know, volume doesn't pick up. So our 15 doesn't necessarily look too bullish. We are above median. We do have a little bit of room up to the top of the band. We are above this 46.14 RSI level. So our 15 is not telling us much. It's just telling us to be careful. Price might have topped out. So now let's check our 5 minute. Right, 15-minute trauma doesn't really tell us much either because we just been chopping under and over it. So we don't see much here on this 15 other than top trend line and potential top out. Now let's check our 5. Right, what does our 5 tell us? Right about the same thing as the 15. Not much, right? We've held this bottom trend line. We've held these lows. We've held this RSI level, and we basically bottomed out on the RSI. Now we're approaching the top of the band. Top of the band does line up with this RSI level, which is also this previous RSI high, which kind of lines up with all these previous highs, which would be that top trend line we were talking about on NASDAQ, right? So not much. 5 minute trauma was just our original level we bounced off near that pre-market open, and we held. So our 5 minute also not telling us much, right? We're just waiting for a break of this consolidation, whether it's a downside or upside. 1 minute, what is our 1 minute telling us? All right. Our 1 minute would have actually told us this is pretty bullish and you should have entered right around here at 126. Reason being, right? You get your bottom out, your bottom trend line, and then look at what our RSI did, right? Price is now higher, and then we reset here literally a couple minutes ago, right? So you would have been able to catch a potential entry here on the 1 minute. But you are trading the 1 minute now, right? So what would you do? If you enter around this 1 minute trauma area, or if you're trying to play the break of these highs, you're definitely going to be trimming earlier, because now you're trading the smaller time frame. So if we approach this previous high, you're going to be wanting to trim or fully TP here. And then if you don't want to TP there and you want to play the full breakout to say that 197, once we approach this high, you would minimum just put your stop loss to break even, depending on where you enter on that trade. Is this a good setup? I would say this is like a D setup. This isn't really that good. It would be a scalp, and there's not much. So in this case scenario, I personally would wait for a bigger break of the bottom trend line, or a bigger break on the 515 of this top trend line. So right here, this is just chop, and I wouldn't trade it. There's no clear sign for a trade here. It's just chop. And then yeah, so does that kind of make sense? Not Galaxy, Santa Cruz. Yeah, there has to be some sort of confluence, right? In this case scenario, we don't have no confluences, and sometimes that's going to be the case. There's just no trade, and that's when you have to be patient and just wait for your trade to present itself, right? So in this case scenario, there's no trade here. We're just waiting, and that's what trading is. Half the time, it's a waiting game. You're just waiting. So no trade here. Let's check gold, see if there's an example of a good possible trade here. On gold, we do have a decent example of a trade here. Okay, so if we were trading gold, we would have seen we start breaking these highs, right? One, you could possibly try to have caught this bottom here at this RSI level, bottom Bollinger Band, and then play the break of like this area, break of medium, break of these highs, and then if you would have done that, then you're trimming at trauma and then putting your stop loss to break even, and you would have been able to catch the actual break of trauma as well, and now you can move your stop loss up to these lows. So that's one way you could have traded this. That's if you're like trading this section too, because you would have been trading this little bottom divergence with the bottoming of the Bollinger Band and this RSI level at 37. So that's the 5 minute though, right? We always want to check every time frame like we were talking about. Check what our 15 did. 15 actually retested median. What is median? Where buyers have to step in. If not, sellers take over. If you notice where we bounced, right at median, right? What is our 15 minute doing? Band's opening up. What are we approaching? 15 minute trauma. If you are long, you are 100% trimming here, right? You are 100% trimming around this area. This is also your previous highs, your 414 area. So this is where you should be trimming 100% or fully even taking profit. Reason being, this is where price could fully reverse. Say, hypothetically speaking, we failed to break trauma and we reject here. What did we now do? We made a lower high, and now we can reverse, come down, make a lower low, and then we continue this bearish move to the downside. So that's why trauma is always going to be a helpful area to trim, right? Say you didn't have trauma on, and then you just had this level here. Yeah, you have a confluence at this 214, but say price never gets there, right? You would have never had an area to trim around this area of trauma, and you would have been waiting for this area instead. And small things like that could be a big factor in the long run, right? This could be whether the fact you get stopped out in profit or break even, or your actual trim or TP hitting. So in this case scenario, we're approaching 15 minute trauma. That would be 100% a trim area. Now let's check our 1 minute. What did our 1 minute just do at these highs? What did we talk about yesterday? RSI resets. Look at the last time we were bottomed out. Where was price? Down here. Where's price now? Down here. What is it also at? 1 minute trauma. This would have legit been your re-entry on this pullback. right? You would have entered at 1 minute trauma. Your RSI is bottoming out. Is this an A plus setup? No, you're scalping the 1 minute. You're playing the 1 minute. You want to have, you know, tight stops and, you know, manage it accordingly. The second you get this pop, you're already setting your stop loss to break even. And now, what are you anticipating? The break of these highs. If you break those highs, what would more than likely happen? You would approach your 15-minute trauma, and then you would again trim there or fully TP. Is that going to happen? I don't know, and that's where risk management comes in handy, and that's why you'd have your stop loss to break even and already make this a risk-free trade. Because what are we still under on the 1 minute median, right? What could we do? We could test those highs, test median, reject, come back down, bands open up. Your 15 and your 5 are technically topped out, and then we could go lower. So it all depends on the situation. That's why I always tell everybody that trades a strategy, you're not trading what you want. You're just reacting to what the market does, right? So whatever the market does, you're just reacting to it. In this case scenario, we're breaking median and this RSI level. So we're more than likely going to pop and see continuation. Has this candle closed yet? Not yet, so we'll see. Has NASDAQ broke this top trend line? Not quite yet. We're still struggling to break. And yeah, so that's the basics of just TRAMA VWAP. It's pretty simple. The more you look at it in real time, the easier it'll get to use. But just nice little extra confluence for entries, exits, stuff like that. But yeah, any other questions from anybody? If not,
I don't really have a question, but I was just gonna say this was a super helpful lesson because I noticed that, especially over this past like week or so, I keep finding that we're in between like key levels that I have marked out with like 100 or 50 point range between them. And I wasn't really sure how to navigate that, so this was really helpful.
yeah, 100%, and that's very true because sometimes, you know, you'll have your levels mapped out the right way, but that's the thing. Sometimes, you know, price won't go exactly to those levels, and that's why they're points of interest, and that's where, you know, TRAMA will come in very handy. So the more you know, it's like having a good eye for it, you know. The more you the more you watch charts, the more you'll kind of learn how to use it in real time. But good comment, Mr. Sean. Anybody else? No? All right. If nobody has any more questions, we could kind of go over a short market